Today on the Transplant Helper, we're going to be talking about choosing a transplant team, particularly in a special case where maybe your current team deems you as high risk and they don't feel comfortable doing the transplant, so they want to refer you to someone else. Stick around.
Hit the subscribe button and the bell notification to become part of the Transplant Helper community.
Hey folks, welcome back to the Transplant Helper again today. My name is Jim Merle, and yes, once again today we're talking about choosing a transplant team. Now, I realize I've discussed this subject many times on the program throughout the years. With 800 programs, of course I have, and I'm going to go ahead and link some of those up in the corner here as well as in the description below, and maybe even a couple on the end screen at the very end of the video, because I think any of those videos might be somewhat helpful to you depending on your certain situation. However, today we are talking about a very specific situation where a good friend of mine is actually in the hospital right now. They've been told by their current team that they're just too high risk and they want to ship them off to someone else. How do you deal with that, and what are some of the things you need to consider before making the choice for that brand new team? So we're going to have 5 things we're going to be discussing today, and I'll put them in the best order that I can. Number 1, when seeking a new team, you need to consider priority. And what I mean by that is consider the priority of your current team, because they are your current team for a reason. They've perhaps been working with you for a period of time, whether it's months or years, or in my case, decades, and they know your situation, they know your case better than anyone else. And if you'll take their advice, sit down, have a meeting with them where they say, okay, we cannot do this transplant, but we believe blank and so can. Take their advice. Take that as priority, and the highest priority, maybe even 75% of your decision, to be based on what they recommend, because likely they've already been in this situation before. If they don't particularly do the higher risk transplant categories, maybe they've already been referring patients over to someone else. Maybe they already have some ideas, have some camaraderie-ship. Is that a word? They work well together with another transplant center, and they can easily send you over. They can direct your records to the right people. They can make the right phone calls. More than likely, you've got members on your team that perhaps have even worked in that transplant center before, maybe back in their days as an intern or in a fellowship. If not, maybe worked in the facility. They most likely work with some of those physicians and some of those care members, and they already have a personal relationship with them. So consider whatever they recommend as priority. So if they're in one hospital and they say, I think you need to go over here to this one, at least give that a lot of consideration, because they probably know what they're speaking about, and they probably already have some connections, and you need those connections to get into that new facility. Okay, so that's number 1. Number 2, think about proficiency. Think about proficiency. And what I mean by that is, and you can get on the internet and see this, or you can jump in a Facebook group, whatever. Just type in a transplant center in your area. Type in one in the vicinity or the region of you and see what their success rates are. Now, don't chalk that up to be the main thing necessarily, and I'll tell you why. It's basically because a lot of those centers kind of pad their numbers. A lot of facilities have great numbers because they do refuse the high-risk patients, so they don't have the failure rates that others do. And sometimes hospitals, on the other hand, get a poor rating because they do the high-risk patients. So obviously they're going to lose more patients because they do more risky procedures and such as that. But nonetheless, try to look at some of those numbers. Try to speak with some people, maybe again on Facebook or whatever. Ask them about their teams, about whether or not they were high risk, what their situation was. Just try to find someone who's very proficient or efficient in doing your type of transplant. I know back when I was going through the transplant process, I'd grown up all my life going to UAB Hospital, Birmingham, Alabama. My family and I had relocated to Mississippi, and at that point in time is when I came up needing a transplant. So the first thing I did, I ran back to UAB. Because of some insurance issues I had, I was sent back to University of Mississippi, where basically I found out I was totally uncomfortable. They had never done a transplant case like mine. They didn't have a lot of experience to begin with, and they just weren't proficient in my particular situation. So I immediately tucked tail and ran, and we moved back to Alabama so I could be around UAB. But look for a facility that is proficient, that has good numbers, good ratings, and that really overall their care is just great. That's what you deserve. Number 3, I would consider number 3 as proximity, okay? And by proximity, it is what it sounds like. Try to find a transplant center, again, based on the recommendations of your current center, based on how good they are, find one nearby, because it's very difficult. It can be done, it's doable, but it's very difficult when you got to travel to a transplant center that's 4, 5, 6 hours away, or maybe halfway across the country, because you're going to need constant and consistent care over the period of long periods of time. Years even can be involved in this, if not a lifetime, where you're not going to be able to really efficiently move back and forth and go to all the appointments, all the tests, all the procedures. You're going to end up having to get a lot of your care outside of your transplant center, just simply because of the mileage and the space between you and them. And you don't want to do that. You want to find someone who's basically in the same proximity or same area as you, if you can help it. Now, if there's not a good one in the area, or not one that can be recommended, as the first 2 points said, yeah, you got to travel a bit, and sometimes very successful transplants occur where someone has moved from here way over there, but be prepared that that might be a part of it, and it's not always the most easy thing to do, okay? So that's the third one. Number 4, you have to consider, and I have to admit it, you've got to consider payment. You got to sit down and have a really big talk with your transplant team, their social services section, financial section, and somehow or another, if you can do it, sit down and talk with your insurance company, because you got to determine if and when this transplant occurs, how well they're going to be able to pay for that. Because I've run into situations with people where either their insurance didn't cover the transplant to begin with, which is worst case scenario, or perhaps only covered it to a certain extent or to a certain amount, maybe an 80-20, which could be disastrous because 20% of $2 million is a lot. Or in a lot of cases, more common, where they cover part of the procedure or part of the care. Maybe they cover the surgery itself, but they have a small window. Maybe they only allow you to be in the hospital, a week leading up to, and say 3 weeks after, and that may not be enough. You never know how this is going to turn out. You may be one of those patients, unfortunate as it is, that's in this more for the long haul, where you may be hospitalized for weeks or months leading up to transplant, and you need an insurance company that's going to pay for that care. That may be care that's taken part in an ICU type unit, where it's really critical care, very expensive. They got to be ready and prepared to pay for that, and you need to ask that question on the front side. On the other side of transplant, the same can apply. Some of us walk out of the hospital after a few days or a few weeks. Others in the hospital for quite a long time and need a lot of aftercare, things like rehabilitation, things like nursing facilities, or kind of halfway houses, as we sometimes call it, but recovery centers need a lot of stuff. And you need to sit down with your insurance company and see, what are your payments trees like? What are the system like? How much will you pay? When will you pay? What will you pay for? And try to find either a new insurance company, which is hard to do, or at least find a center, a transplant center that they're willing to work with well, because sometimes they may not do something with this particular center, but they may have a better agreement or a better relationship with this one. They might consider them to be a kind of a priority type center, or whatever that word is, and they'll work with them a lot better. So you have to consider payment in that. So number 5, you've also got to consider, this is a big one as well, consider personality. Once you've gotten through the first 4, if and when you go and meet this potential new team, I want you to walk into that meeting as if you're bringing them to a job interview, okay? You don't have to go there. You don't have to go to that place. You don't have to give them, I hate to say it, your business. They don't deserve you yet. They've got to earn you. They've got to earn you as a patient. And you need to walk into that room, not being proud or, mean about it, but you got to walk in that room prepared with questions and kind of grill them, interview them, make them earn you as your care team. Make them deserve it, okay? They've got to explain to you what's going to happen. They need to know the system. They need to sit down and answer your questions. If your team is not great, and I'll say that again, if they are not absolutely great on the front side, they will stink on the back side, okay? I'm being serious about it. I've got too many friends, and this burns me up. I've got too many friends right now who are getting very, very poor aftercare because in the beginning, they didn't really get personalized care to begin with. You got to sit down, get to know the people in the room, the doctors, the physicians, the surgeons, the coordinators, the nurses, the cleaning staff even, everybody at your facility and your clinics. You need to get to know them up front and be level with them, that you want to be treated like a name, not a number, that you want to get specific, personalized care, and they are going to have to give you that. And if they're not going to give you that up front, or at least promise that, I promise you this, you won't get it on the backside. Again, your care will stink. I've got friends right now who, whenever they're in need, and I hate this, I'll just call their name, the Kennedys. I feel for you, Ron. Every single time he or his wife tries to put in a call to his transplant center, they leave messages, they send emails, they do everything in the world right. They rarely get callbacks, whether that's an actual appointment that is needed or certain procedures that are needed or prescriptions to be refilled. They get just treated worse than they ought, for sure. Okay, I'd say like trash, but that's me. Again, it burns me up to think about it. But you've got to make sure you're getting some personalized care out of these people. You need to meet their personality first so you can try to predict whether or not you're going to get that great care in the end. So if you're having to choose a new transplant center for whatever reason, maybe it's because you have been deemed too high risk for your current center, you got to change, or if you're kind of just starting from scratch, I still think these 5 things will make a big difference. Priority, listen to your current team, take their advice and recommendations. Proficiency, what are the ratings? How good do they do? What are the success rates? Proximity, is it close by? Is it easy to get to? You're in this for the long haul. Payment, what will your insurance do with that and how much will they help? And then personality, will they actually give you personalized care? Those things really, really matter. Hope you're not in this position, but I know some of you are, so I thought this would be helpful. If this video has helped you out in any way, please give it a big thumbs up or a like. That helps YouTube to know you like this, and it helps me to know I can continue to make content similar to this. In addition to that, if you're not already a subscriber, right now, today is the perfect time. Hit that subscribe button, maybe the bell notification. As a matter of fact, today's the day. I got to look at my calendar. Yep, it's National Subscriber Day. Today is the day. Today's the day you need to do it. Hit the button and subscribe. That way I can continue to provide you with content which hopefully will help to advocate, educate, and motivate you as a transplant patient. And as always, if you got any questions or comments, description below is perfect. I read all my comments, reply to back as many as I can, probably hundreds a day. And I look forward to yours. Thanks so much for joining me today. Until next time, stay stronger, friends.